Hey guys, welcome back. So now brace yourselves, because we're getting back into Jason Aaron's Avengers, which has so much going on at the same time, which is why for this video, we're just going to focus on what's happening with Mephisto and the Council of Red, because some of the other things just in Avengers issue 750, they really gotta have their own video. Otherwise, you guys will probably get whiplash from the narration, if you haven't already got it from just reading the series so far. And with that said, let's get into it. But first, if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to catch the spills every week. And don't forget to hit that bell up top so we can squat up in the comments for the first hour. Alright, so for this one, we're going to do quite a bit of jumping around, but I'm going to try to keep it as concise as possible, because there's also a lot to go over here. But initially jumping into this, we start off with Kazar, who essentially is Marvel's "we have Tarzan at home" type of character. But for Kazar, who had recently joined the Agents of Wakanda during Empire, with him helping the Avengers in the Savage Land at the time, but this had later then led to T'Challa sending Kazar as an agent of Wakanda on a time-traveling mission to gather information on the unknown history of Earth's legacy powers, which then sent him a million years back into the past, which, as it turns out, with Jason Aaron, this is the era of the Avengers 1 million BC. And prior to this point, the Avengers 1 million BC, they've mainly been dealing with Mephisto, but just before Kazar got sent on this mission, we had seen that the Avengers 1 million BC, they had been confronted by younger Thanos from an alternate future, back in Avengers issue 38 or Legacy issue 738. However you want to look at it. But at that time when we were shown this, it was really just to say that throughout countless years, Mephisto has been the Avengers' greatest enemy, and not so much to the case to where it's directly Mephisto every time, but in a number of cases, whether in the past, present, or the future, he has indirectly tried to take down the Avengers a number of times. And we're given examples of this with Mephisto making deals with Kid Thanos, with Apocalypse, with the Hulk, or with Doom the Living Planet, and he's made these different deals either with villains or in some cases heroes under the guise that he was giving them what they wanted. But of course with Mephisto, he was using all of them for his own interest, which is usually how Mephisto operates. But through the course of this, we were given the idea that he's been at this for billions of years prior to the present day, and from the present day, eons into the future. But also keep in mind, and we're gonna get back to the story in just a minute, but keep in mind, when we're talking about Jason Aaron and the future, Jason Aaron kinda has a future of his own that's going on, because as far as I'm concerned, his future is more of an alternate timeline, going eons into the future with Phoenix, Wolverine, and Doom being just crazy OP. So just keep that in mind. But as far as Mephisto's grand plan of making deals with different people to either break up the Avengers or take them down, eventually this had brought us to a time-traveling Kid Thanos, who was told by Mephisto that Earth would give him the one thing that he desires the most, because if there's one thing that Earth will be good at, it'll be death. But really it's around this time where we find the time-traveling Kazar from the present day getting dropped into the 1 million BC era. And initially when Kazar arrives, he finds himself running into Kid Thanos. And at this point for Kazar, who recently got an upgrade, I mean, if you want to call it that, with the whole death and resurrection thing that just gave him a connection to the Savage Land. But for Kazar in this moment, that ain't doing him no good. And even if they were there in the Savage Land, I doubt that this match between him and Kid Thanos would go any different, because Kid Thanos is wrecking this guy and he's getting ready to kill him. But then the Avengers 1 million BC, they then show up, saving Kazar from what most certainly was about to be his death. Because Kid Thanos really had this one in the bag, he really did. Kazar was about to be donezo. But from here, the Avengers 1 million BC, they quickly take down Kid Thanos, with the Phoenix chaining them up, Agamotto opening the portal, and Odin sending Kid Thanos through back to the time and place which he had came from. But with these Avengers from the past taking care of Thanos, you then get a moment to where Odin just blatantly disrespects Kazar, and he's more or less like, man, if this guy hiding in the bushes is the future of human civilization, then it's all downhill from here. But for Kazar at this point, his mission's complete, so he uses the time knife to take him home, which then leaves us with a moment between Odin and Phoenix, to where she's then like, oh, Odin's just being a bit grumpy, perhaps having another kid would help. And for Odin, that kind of talk from the Phoenix from there just has him all hot and bothered. But it's here after Kazar's left that we find that Dr. Doom has been watching this whole thing. And much like a number of the other examples that we've seen, this Doom is then approached by Mephisto. And Mephisto notices that this Doom is different, because he's seen other Dooms come to this point in time before, thinking that they could attack a more primitive world with their weapons from the future. But unlike the other villains and the other Dooms that Mephisto's seen, this Doom has just stood by and watched. But really quickly, this Doom tells Mephisto that he's very familiar with him as well. But in the case of this Doom, he claims that he's no ordinary Doom. He's the Doom Supreme, master of the darkest arts, and the Doom above all. which is something that'll more or less be proven as this whole thing plays out. But with him at least having experience with Mephisto, Doom just tells him to cut to the chase, cause he knows Mephisto has some type of bargain, so he more or less just tells him to spit it out. And it's in this conversation where Mephisto lets Doom know that he's tried a number of times and in a number of ways to stop the Avengers before they could band together, but for some reason they always come out on top. And over the years, the number of heroes and hero teams, they're only gonna stack up in numbers, continue to grow and just do the same thing. And it's for that reason where Mephisto tells Doom if it works for them, why not for us? How about we form a team of our own? Which from here leads into the creation of the new multiversal Masters of Evil, which gives us King Killmonger, the King of Kings, who had conquered both Wakanda and Asgard. But this also gives us the Black Skull, who's the Red Skull with the Venom Symbiote, who in his case we saw briefly during Heroes Reborn, but then we also get a Norman Osborn, Green Goblin, Ghost Rider mashup as well, along with Kid Thanos, who we'd seen before, and many more. But as far as the multiversal Masters of Evil, we'll touch on this a little bit more towards the end of this video, because the next issue starts off Avengers Death Hunters Part 1, while you also have the story continuing in Jason Aaron's 2022 Avengers Forever. But just after we see this conversation between Doom and Mephisto, we then jump back over to Kazar, who we find in mid-time jump making his way back to the present day, but while he's on his way back, he's then bombarded by a ton of time-seeking missiles, which knock him out of the time flow onto an unfamiliar planet while frying his time knife before he can reach the present day. And it's quickly that we find out that he was brought here intentionally by this huge armored stranger who tells Kazar that he's been prowling through history's dark secrets, and those secrets have noticed. But also this stranger, he lets Kazar know that he's not going to kill him, because if a time traveler kills another time traveler, that's one of the things that'll throw up a flag for the Deathlocks, and this guy's master has given him the task of trying to avoid that and keep the secrets of the past secret. But through the course of this fight, Kazar grabs his time knife, which is still pretty useful as a knife, who knew? And he knocks off the mask of this guy, revealing that it's Howard Stark of an alternate reality, who had became the Iron Inquisitor. And as soon as we see this, it then takes us into his origin, as well as the next reveal with his connection to the Council of Red. And it's here with his origin where we're taken to Earth-4111, and we're shown that this Howard Stark, he was also very successful. He had made more billions than any man in history. He had created S.H.I.E.L.D., he'd saved the world a few times, but for him, after studying the history of the Earth's greatest powers and the legacies that had shaped the planet throughout history, he believed that the Stark's name should be mentioned among the rest. But he knew that that was unlikely with him having a bad liver, he was getting older, and in his world, the Age of Miracles was just around the corner, with a number of mutants, immortals, and superhumans soon to step in, to where then after he's gone, he will be long forgotten. But this led this Howard Stark to making a deal with Mephisto, which Howard thought that this deal would play out like any other deal that he's made on his way to making billions, but that experience of being savvy and making the deal work out in his favor, it definitely didn't help him here, because as part of his deal with Mephisto, which was to ensure that the Stark name lives on, this was done by Mephisto stopping Howard from aging, but in return, this Howard killed his son Tony Stark, which at the time he looked at as the price for immortality. But also with making this deal, it costed him his fortunes, his business, and in exchange, though he would live forever, he would continue his days as a slave to Mephisto, as Hell's armorer, and as the Iron Inquisitor, the chief security officer of the Council of Red. And with the Council of Red, we had talked about them briefly during Heroes Reborn and Heroes Return, because through the course of those stories, it was really Mephisto from the 616 universe giving a demonstration to 615 other Mephistos as far as what just one of them could do with changing their own reality. And even though at that time it seemed like Phil Coulson had failed, and I mean more or less he did, but 616 Mephisto flipped this around for the purpose of bringing the Council of Red together and inspiring each and every one of them to more or less do the same thing. But also with how this is done, well, we get a bit of a teaser towards the notion of 616 Mephisto possibly scamming these other 615 Mephistos as well, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But as far as Kazar's encounter with the Iron Inquisitor, once again, this Howard Stark, he's not trying to kill Kazar, at least not directly, but instead, once he gets him out of the time stream and onto this planet, he's then more or less like, well, did my job, I'm out. And right after that, we find out that this Howard Stark had left Kazar here because this world was about to get consumed by Galactus, which really was the Iron Inquisitor's way of killing Kazar without killing him. But this is one of those things to where we later then find out that Kazar actually didn't die here. But instead, as it turned out, he ended up making a deal with Galactus and becoming his herald. And we also find that with Kazar, that he's very much the Norn Rad type of herald, because he's constantly leading Galactus to planets that are uninhabited, while also entertaining his own side quests along the way. But after this, jumping back to 1 million BC in the 616 universe, and it's here in this moment where we find Doom returning after assembling his team, to where then also we discover the terms of the agreement between Mephisto and Doom. And it's here where we find that Mephisto claims that the Council wants to save Earth-616 for last. And with Doom hearing this, he's just like, yeah, okay, whatever, that's not bad, because he doesn't care what order they go in. But for Mephisto, with him making this request along with the Council of Reds, who collectively do have their own plan, but with him doing this, I can't help but think that this is going to benefit 616 Mephisto and end badly for the other 615 Mephistos. And I can't help but think that because we're talking about Mephisto here. Come on. And for him, that may be intentional, or it may be something he's just doing to cover himself. But I can't help but think that there's something a little extra there. But just after this, we then jump over to Earth-818, where we find that the Masters of Evil, they nearly succeeded at just slaughtering the entire roster of the Avengers 1 million BC, with their Odin being one of the last men standing. And I'll admit, at this point here, it leads for a pretty sick story going into Avengers Forever, because when we see this Odin go out in a blaze of glory, when the Masters of Evil's Dark Phoenix just lets down fire on this guy, there's a couple things that happen here that set us up for what's to come as far as Earth-818. Because as Phoenix is just flaming him, Kid Thanos then cuts in and he's like, no, I told you guys I get to kill all the Odins, and that's when he then blasts Odin, presumably killing him. But then also here, when this Earth-818 Ghost Rider is killed, this is seen by Robbie Reyes all the way on Earth-616, with the last thing that he heard was this chilling laugh through that other Ghost Rider as he saw the other Avengers of 1 million BC get slaughtered. And even though Robbie doesn't know who or what's doing this, or whose laugh he heard just before this dream ended, but with him seeing the portions that he did, we find that it's a precursor to his multiversal vengeance being initiated. But just after this, we find the Masters of Evil, who at this point have done a number of travels, and even to the point to where some of them have just lost count. But at this time, we find them arriving on Earth-616, with them discovering that the Deathlocks have arrived here, and Doom telling these guys that they gotta hunt them down. But as soon as they get here, they're greeted by Orb, who's just running at the mouth on how he's a big fan and how he's seen so much, and because he has the Eye of the Watcher from Original Sin. And he just runs down the list of these guys like, oh, you're Supreme Doom, the Doom above all. And you're Dark Phoenix with her pet Berserker, King of Kings, King Killmonger, Black Skull, Ghost Goblin. Like, he's completely fanning out on the Masters of Evil, because Orb, he's pretty sick himself anyway. But when he gets here, it's hardly seconds that pass before these guys just kill Orb. And I mean, it could have been like a minute or two, but it was quick. And Orb was kind of like, man, well, I should have seen that coming. And in all honesty, he really should have. But with the Masters of Evil removing the Eye of the Watcher from Orb, he had believed that they were taking it so that they could use it to their benefit, but Doom was more or less like it's of no use to them. Because one, this Doom, he's never been one to just watch, but also, aside from these guys hunting Deathlocks, they plan on rewriting the history of the 616 as well. And it's for that reason that Doom doesn't believe that the Eye of the Watcher would be needed. But with time, we'll find that he has a bit of a change of heart, because when you're dealing with Mephisto, all information is important information, and especially when it's 616 Mephisto and a 616 Eye of the Watcher. Like, come on. But we'll talk about how exactly that pans out later when we pick back up with the series. Alright, so starting this off, we're gonna go back to issue 750, just moments before the multiversal Masters of Evil arrived on Earth-616, because it's here where we find Black Panther, Captain Marvel, Captain America, Iron Man, and Robbie Reyes Ghost Rider having a meeting that's mainly centered around the Avengers just being a mess right now, with so much that has happened recently that has left them short-handed. And mind you, since issue 1, the Avengers have been going through it, back to back to back, with Dark Celestials, the War of Realms, both Heroes Reborn and Heroes Return. They were fighting Namor for a while, along with the Defenders of the Deep. The Winter Guard came back, which, still. But they came back with Red Widow and 2 gods added to the team, with Perrin and Chernobog, who have been gone since Jason Aaron's God of Thunder. But then on top of that, you had the vampire thing that was going on for a while, and then, oh yeah, and everybody had the Phoenix Force. And aside from that, I'm sure I'm leaving out some stuff too. Because on top of the Avengers dealing with all this, you also had the individual heroes dealing with their own issues within their own arcs. And for the most part, during the course of this meeting, this is why they're talking about bringing in some fresh blood. Because at this point, they're coming fresh out of World War She-Hulk, which was something. within itself that on the bright side led to the return of your traditional Jennifer Walters. But with her going back to her normal She-Hulk self, she immediately requested time away from the Avengers, which is something that we'll catch up on in another video. But aside from She-Hulk, these guys are a few people short. Like for example, you got Blade, who had recently joined the Avengers prior to this point, only for him then to have to leave and be sheriff of Vampire Nation. And then on top of that, you also got Thor, who had went back to Asgard for a while after going in to back up Jennifer Walters towards the conclusion of World War She-Hulk. But within this very meeting, there are a couple things that happened that really just split this story in half. And when I say split it in half, I mean part of it goes right into the Avengers Forever series, while the other part continues into the Death Hunters Part 1. Because during this meeting where we get to Robbie Reyes, and he tells everyone here like what needs to happen in the event that he's killed, like we talked about in the last video, with him seeing the Avengers 1 million BC being hunted down but in an alternate universe. But also when he had seen this, it was a first person view through the Ghost Rider of that universe, so it really had him shook because how real it seemed. But on one hand, this took us to a conversation between Robbie and T'Challa, where Robbie gave T'Challa more of the details on these different dreams, with him seeing a number of Ghost Riders dying, all of them cavemen, and they weren't dying alone, but they had other Black Panthers, Odins, and others as well. But in the middle of them having this conversation, Namor then shows up, which initially comes off as hostile, because very recently the situation was very hostile, which we'll talk more about when we get into She-Hulk. But for the time being, recently Namor owed She-Hulk a favor, and for that favor, she asked that he would make amends with the Avengers, which is pretty much why he's here. And as a token of sincerity, he brings a deathlock that he had found sulking around Atlantis. It's like the perfect gift. But as soon as Namor pulls this guy out the water, he says Nexus point reached, scanning for Avengers. Then he says alert, Omni Avenger found, as it detects that multiversal vengeance is happening. And it's right there where Robbie and this Deathlock shoot up in flames and beam out of here over to Earth-818. And for the two of them, this is where their story branches off into Avengers Forever, with Earth-818 being the location of the most recent Ghost Rider death that Robbie had seen. But we'll jump back into that when we get into Avengers Forever, because with going into the Death Hunters Part 1, it's here where we follow Tony from the meeting, with him telling the others that he would go and check on Thor over in Asgard, where Tony says even the air tastes like beer. But at this time for Thor, he's dealing with a lot, because for Thor, it's still the build-up leading to God of Hammers, with this taking place after Devour King, and I believe just after Prey. So for Thor, we know he's going through quite a bit of the family issues at this moment, with the mystery of whether or not the Phoenix is actually his mother being one of the biggest issues at the moment. But of course, with us looking back at a lot of this, we already got our answer to that mystery during God of Hammers, when we were given the answer that Gaia is still Thor's mother. But back at this time, Jason Aaron was doing something different, and you know, the mystery was up in the air. And that's where a lot of Thor's frustration lies at this moment, with him recently trying to reach out to Gaia and her not responding, and Thor wanting answers with him feeling fire in his veins, which in itself is something confusing, with Thor trying to figure out who his actual birth mother is. But also at this time with him talking to Tony, Thor lets Tony know that he's been reading the Tome of Kings, which like we talked about before was a book written from all the kings of Asgard, where they talk about events that had either passed or some cases were yet to come. But for Thor, throughout all his searching throughout this book, he hadn't found anything about a prehistoric Phoenix avatar being his mother. And it's frustrating again for him at this time because he's not getting a clear answer. But with Tony coming here and being a friend, he makes a suggestion that Thor talks with Echo, the current avatar of the Phoenix. But Thor quickly rejects this suggestion because he doesn't want anything to do with the Phoenix, which is kind of counterintuitive to him getting an answer, but it's how the big guy feels. But while they're having this conversation, we then also find that Echo has made her way to Asgard, but Sif won't let her go any further than the Rainbow Bridge, even with Echo insisting that her and Thor talk, with both her and Thor having a lot that they're dealing with individually, and Echo truly believing that the two of them can work this out. But again, with Sif not letting her pass, this isn't personal against Echo. Sif has no problem with Maya Lopez, but the issue is with the Phoenix and Thor not wanting the Phoenix in Asgard, let alone anywhere near him. But this conversation starts to get a bit spicy when Echo goes Phoenix and insists that she's gotta make her way in, but then strangely enough, right in the middle of this, Sif freezes and another voice speaks to Echo, telling her she doesn't know the first rule of the Firebird, which right away lets us know something weird's going on. And on top of this, Tony and Thor, they know something's going on too, because for them, Asgard just suddenly gets silent, and Thor knows already that the minds of the gods themselves have been paralyzed. But the question is, why not them? And it's here where another Deathlock shows up, telling the two of them that they haven't been affected because his shields are protecting them. And on top of that, he lets them know that he's come here to warn them, to warn the Avengers from across the Megaverse, from the Watchtower at Infinity's End. And it's right there with 3 clauses go through this guy's chest, because the Dark Phoenix, her Berserker, and King Killmonger have made their way to Asgard. And when these guys show up here, it's not long after we had just seen them at Avengers Mountain with Doom, but from the time that Doom initially assembled this team up until now, it's been quite a while, and these guys have gotten a lot of experience killing Avengers. But on top of their multiversal mission, they're also familiar with your modern day versions of a lot of the heroes because of the history in their home worlds. But initially when these guys show up, both Tony and Thor, they think these guys are actually their 616 counterparts. And like in the case of King Killmonger, they really don't know who he is until he says what he is and takes his mask off, or better yet shows his face through his destroyer armor. But I gotta say, with seeing this King Killmonger, and really a lot of these guys from the Masters of Evil, I really hope that we get some origin issues at some point, which I'm kind of thinking that we will. Don't quote me on that, but the main reason that I'm thinking that we will is because we got a lot of that for the Avengers 1 million BC, and on top of that, we got all the origins for the members of the Squadron Supreme that were more or less remade for the members of Mephisto's Justice League. So fingers crossed we get some one-shots for all these guys too, because I want to see the story of this King Killmonger who took over Wakanda and Asgard, as well as built this armor. And while they're at it, go ahead and sprinkle in a bit of a backstory on the Storm Slayer axe, because I want to see all of it. But again, when these guys show up, Tony, he's thinking that these are like the 616 guys, because Tony's asking Killmonger, since when did you mix Asgardian and Wakandan tech? And when he sees this Wolverine, which is the Phoenix's Berserker, right away Tony's like, what they do to your eyes, man? Because they really don't know what's going on in the bigger picture. But really quickly here, when more Deathlocks start showing up, Echo eventually makes her way in when she hears all the commotion and where it's coming from, since the rest of Asgard is just bone quiet. But during this time, with a number of Deathlocks who are just showing up, they're trying to fill in Tony and Thor on what's going on. Because like we'd seen when the Masters of Evil just arrived in Earth-616, they came here to hunt down Deathlocks before they can tell the Avengers what exactly these guys were up to. But real quickly, like one at a time, they try to tell these guys what's going on, as far as who the multiversal Masters of Evil are and why they're here. But when one starts talking, they get destroyed. And as soon as that one's taken out, another one picks up where the last one left off. And this continues all the way until they're down to like just 2 of these Deathlocks left, who finally get the message out about the Doom above all, the Council of Red, and the Masters of Evil going back in time and killing the first Avengers. But then it's here where Thor believes that he's knocked out the Dark Phoenix, to where then he turns around and tells Echo that she's next, and he lets Echo know that she's more or less gotta go. But then this Dark Phoenix comes back and she hits Thor, and Thor just goes flying. But this Dark Phoenix, she then goes to Echo, who, by the way, this whole time, this Dark Phoenix has been taunting Echo, telling her that the 616 Phoenix had to be desperate, which also has me thinking, by the way, like I thought there was only one Phoenix throughout the multiverse, but we're just rolling with it. But this Dark Phoenix lets Echo know that the Phoenix here in the 616 had to have been desperate to choose Echo, an avatar whose power is really just to mimic others. But when she says this then makes Echo think about recently back at Avengers Mountain when she was training and trying to perfect her skills as an avatar for the Phoenix. And at the time, T'Challa had given her access to information of the short list of people with the power to kill a Phoenix. And it was for that reason that Echo learned to combat Owen Reese, the Molecule Man, Thanos, Galactus, the Living Tribunal, the Beyonders, Wanda Maximoff, Odin Borson, and Thor as well. And for Echo, with her recalling this, she then uses this training to her advantage, and she takes the fight to this Dark Phoenix. But then in addition to that, Echo also tries to free the Berserker Wolverine, but she has no success in her attempt, because with what's left of this guy, he's only a shell of who he was. But just after this, the Dark Phoenix, she then just kills the last of the Deathlocks that are here. Like, she just incinerates these guys. Which again, at this point, this is the only mission of the Masters of Evil at this time in the 616, with them only wanting to get rid of all the Deathlocks. And the only reason that it's just that, just killing Deathlocks, for now, is because of the agreement between Doom and Mephisto. But then just after this, Dark Phoenix pulls another trick out of her bag. And it's here where she brings out her Berserker Thor, with her saying that the Thunderer and the Phoenix can indeed be one happy family. And I don't know what she's thinking, but that Thor don't look too happy to me. Alright, so at this point we switch gears from where we had left off, with us seeing King Killmonger, the Dark Phoenix, and her Berserker making their way to Asgard. And it's here where we then switch lanes over to Shawnee, Kansas, where we find Captain America burying a fellow veteran from World War II. And with them doing this, there's kind of an awkward moment, and I mean aside from him being the single-handed pallbearer, which of course he can do because he's Captain America. But with him being here, there's a couple things going on, cause one, he gives the widow of his fellow veteran his condolences, but she has bad vision so she can't really see that it's Captain America. So with her asking him who he is and how did he know her husband, in response Cap tells her that they fought in the war together, which then kinda throws her off, because with her just going off of his voice, she's like, you sound a little young to be a World War II veteran. And at that point, somebody should have just told this woman who this man is. But that didn't happen, and the rest of her family just left her in grief and confusion. But also it's here where we find that Steve had asked Carol Danvers to make her way out there as well, and also to bring along with her Brandy Selby, who prior to this we've often referred to as the Star Brand baby, who you guys may remember from our talks on Heroes Reborn. But really quickly we can tell that Brandy doesn't want to be here, and Carol thought that at least Brandy would be happy to get out of Avengers Mountain to get a bit of a change of scenery at the least. But at this point Brandy had already been sneaking out and fighting different aliens because she's super eager to just be the Star Brand and protect the Earth. But at the same time Carol is trying to get Brandy to calm down because she was just a toddler a couple weeks ago. And for a moment we get this back and forth between Carol and Brandy, with Carol more or less telling her that she is a baby, so that's how she's gonna treat her. But even with that being the case, I want you guys to keep in mind that during the meeting that we had talked about in Avengers issue 750, Carol said herself that that Brandy scares the bejesus out of her. So regardless of Carol talking a little tough here to the kid, deep down inside Carol, she don't want the baby smoke. The Star Brand baby smoke. She wants no part of it. But when Cap steps into this, it's here where we find that he had wanted Brandy to come out here so that he could show Brandy where her mother used to live. And when he does this, he pretty much tells Brandy the story that we had seen back in Avengers issue 30, when we were given the story of Brandy's mother, Suzanne Selby, who had worked at Roxxon for like 15 years at a limestone plant, and when it shut down she had then moved to Madripoor, and it was there where her and her boyfriend got recruited by space coyotes who were ex-SHIELD agents, which was an opportunity that she took in hopes of building a better life for her child. But this then got her smuggled into Shi'ar controlled territory, to where then she was detained as an illegal alien and more or less left to defend herself in Shi'ar Intergalactic Immigration Court, to where then she was sentenced to 3 years in Ravenstar prison. And when this happened, it was during this time while she was in transit when she was selected by the Star Brand. And at the time it was expressed that this could have went left very fast, especially with Suzanne getting ready to go into labor and having this much power this quickly. And I mean, her getting the power, it did cause her to destroy the prison cargo ship, but it could have been way worse. But with Captain America and Captain Marvel bringing Brandy out here, they really just want to make sure that Brandy understands, with all this power that she has, that she's more than just a space cannon. And they're hoping that with showing Brandy her mother's home, that she'll begin to learn who she is aside from just being the Star Brand. And we can see that it's working a bit, because Brandy, she wants to go inside. She wants to interact with things that her mother used to own and connect with who her mother was. But while they're here, not long after, a group of Deathlocks show up. And with seeing these guys, right away Captain America's like, okay, these are time-traveling assassins, and with them showing up here, this can't be good. But quickly these Deathlocks let them know that they're not the Deathlocks that they fear, and that they've come here seeking the greatest Avenger of this era, because they have crossed thousands of universes following a star, the star of all stars, the mighty Star Brand. But with them coming here, much like the Deathlocks we'd seen in Asgard, these Deathlocks also let them know that they've come seeking sanctuary from the Death Hunters. And it's just seconds later when they arrive, when the Ghost Goblin then drops one of his noggin bombs. And it's right there where this bomb just blows up the house of Suzanne Selby, Brandy's deceased mom. Just like that, the house is gone. And it's just moments after Brandy had just seen it for the first time. But it's here where we see Ghost Goblin, the Norman Osborn Green Goblin mashup from an alternate universe, along with the Black Skull, who like we'd seen is the Red Skull, with the Venom symbiote from another universe. But like we'd seen before, with them making their way to the 616, at this point they've killed a lot of other heroes in other universes. And with them making their way here specifically to take out these Deathlocks, at this point they've more or less made a sport out of it, to where now Ghost Goblin's kind of like, let's see who can kill the most. And initially, much like we'd seen with Tony and Thor over in Asgard, here Captain Marvel and Captain America, they initially don't know what's the deal with these guys. And right off the bat, Carol Danvers, she really doesn't care. because these two guys attacked them, and that's all she needs to know. But for Captain America, initially when he sees the symbiote and everything, he thinks that this is Eddie Brock, but the Black Skull doesn't waste any time letting this Cap know who he is and that he's from another Earth, as well as the fact that he's killed plenty other Captain Americas along the way. But through the course of this, with just Black Skull and Ghost Goblin against all of these guys, against Captain America, Captain Marvel, as well as all the Deathlocks that are here, and the two of these guys, they turn it up. And they go back to the mission just slaughtering these Deathlocks, which then causes a couple of these Deathlocks to kind of doubt the heroes of the 616, with them seeing this and also question like what's so special about these guys, why this reality. And as soon as they say this, it's here where Brandy steps in, just torching the Black Skull and punching the mess out of Ghost Goblin for the two of them burning down her mother's house. But also through the course of this, you have like this one Deathlock who's telling the others who are doubting the 616, and he's telling them that this universe is special because it's on the verge of its next evolution. Carol Danvers, her powers have been ascending, even though in this moment it doesn't look like it. But come on, she's going up against a Ghost Rider with the Goblin Serum. Give her a break. But also, the Phoenix has been reborn into something new, and the Ghost Rider, Robbie Reyes, he's just tapped into next level cosmic awareness, which again is teasing this crazy evolution of the heroes of the 616, as well as the future of the Avengers, which according to these Deathlocks, it has a lot to do with Brandy Selby, the current Star Brand, who these Deathlocks have said she's gonna go on to be the greatest Avenger of this era, which could mean a number of things. But with Brandy stepping in here to help out both Captain America and Captain Marvel, once again they're trying to get Brandy to stand down. But with them doing this, it's here where Black Skull and Ghost Goblin, they take this opportunity to make their way of escape, when Ghost Goblin then drops all of his noggin bombs, which collectively are enough to blow up a whole continent, and if not, at least a country or two. But when they do this, right away Carol Danvers, she hops to it. She lets Steve know that this time she's jumping on the grenade, so she catches all the bombs and she takes off, only for Carol to then get stopped by Brandy, who then burns out all of these bombs before they can blow. And I'm gonna tell you right now, like, I'm no bomb diffusion expert, but I thought that the ignition was kind of what made bombs go off. And I don't know, I could be wrong. Maybe I watched Looney Tunes too much as a kid. Maybe I'm tripping. But for Brandy, with her doing this and exerting so much power, much like how she did when she was an infant, and it sped up her age to make her appear like she was like 9 years old, well, it's in this moment that we see that the same thing has happened again. Because for Brandy, with her stopping these bombs, as well as fighting against Black Skull and Ghost Goblin, using all of this power, it's caused her to age again, which now kind of poses the question of how long does she have before she uses too much and ages too far. Alright, so from here we're still doing a bit of jumping around, because in Asgard we still got Thor, Tony, and Echo, who are dealing with King Killmonger, as well as the Dark Phoenix and her Berserker, while also at this time in Kansas City, we got Captain America, Captain Marvel, and the Star Brand, Brandy Selby, who we had just seen take on the Black Skull and the Ghost Goblin, which Brandy had pretty much handled by herself, but with her exerting the amount of power that she did, it had then caused her to rapidly grow into a teenager, and at this point Captain America and Captain Marvel, they're trying to figure out what's going on with Brandy just before they make their way back to Avengers Mountain, because they're still kind of in shock at the moment. But it's just before they head back where we go over there first, and we dive into this conversation between Kid Thanos and the Doom Above All, where we find Kid Thanos go into a bit of a backstory about himself that takes us back to his world, because again, all these members of the new Masters of Evil, they come from alternate Earths. And for Kid Thanos, we get a story that's very similar to what we'd seen in Thanos Rising, and is visually depicted to look just like it, in that moment where we had seen 616 Thanos getting ready to cut open his mother in order to get the secrets about who he is and cut it out of her. And for this Kid Thanos, who's given a very similar story, but we find out for him, in his case, that he had been recruited by the Doom Above All shortly after he had killed his mother, and his encounter with Mephisto, as well as the Avengers 1 million BC that we talked about in Avengers issue 750, those events had taken place before this as well, with him already taking the path of killing half a dozen Eternals, which then evolved to him using time travel in an attempt to go back to prehistoric Earth and kill a Celestial. For research purposes, of course. But with him telling the story, this lets us know how Kid Thanos, after getting sent back to his world in his time when he was defeated by the prehistoric Avengers, he came back thinking that he had looked everywhere to get his answers. And this is what led him to cutting open his mother, with him thinking like, this is it, this has got to be where I'm going to get my answer. And it's in this conversation with him sharing all of this with Doom Supreme, or the Doom Above All, where Kid Thanos expresses that he feels like the blood of his mother is still on him. But at this point, the Doom Above All, he's working on a spell, so he's more or less telling Kid Thanos to shut up so he can concentrate. But Kid Thanos, he just goes on anyway. And it's here where he tells Doom Supreme that the Sticky One told him that Doom had sacrificed someone precious to him, and that Doom's armor is forged of his lover's skin. And though in this moment Kid Thanos, he doesn't ask Doom Supreme to go into details, but he does ask him, was it worth it? Was it worth what he had done? And Doom just tells him he knows that it's worth it. Every morning he wakes up and he's Doom. And it's kind of like what other answer would you expect from any Doom anywhere? But right after this, Doom tells Kid Thanos to get ready. And it's here where their assault on Avengers Mountain begins. And when this Doom does this, we're reminded of how every magical spell has its cost. Whether it's on that particular sorcerer or on the cosmos itself, that's paying the toll for the magic going somewhere. And it's here where we find that Doom Supreme, something that he's mastered very well, is making sure the cost of that power goes to someone else aside from himself. And with Doom raining down this massive attack on what essentially is still a celestial, this power is costing the lives of billions across thousands of different worlds. And as soon as this attack begins, we go inside to where T'Challa, he knows that Avengers Mountain is in bad condition. But in addition to that, they're short-handed with everyone spread out and Robbie Reyes just disappearing out of thin air, which we talked about in the previous issue, and we'll catch up on that during Avengers Forever. But it's here where this Deathlock tells T'Challa that Robbie Reyes, he's currently in a different reality at the moment, so he won't be able to help here. But this Deathlock then tells T'Challa that there's a chance that he can, if he's allowed to interface with the Celestial directly. But on top of this, he tells T'Challa that I know you're gonna say you only met me a moment ago and you have no reason to trust a random Deathlock. And he knows that T'Challa is gonna say this because Avenger Prime told him that T'Challa would. But in addition to this, Avenger Prime also told this Deathlock that T'Challa would trust him, and he would know that everything that this Deathlock has said to be true, because all of the Deathlocks are dead, for starters. But with T'Challa being the king of the dead, they cannot lie to their king. And that's how T'Challa knows right away that this guy can help and that he's not lying. But I also want to say that right now there's like this hovering mystery of who is Avenger Prime. Because this is something we'd seen a version of in Mighty Avengers Volume 2, Issue 14, when the ancient sorcerer Kalu merged the Mighty Avengers, which included Blue Marvel, Power Man, White Tiger, Jessica Jones, Blade, She-Hulk, the Spectrum, and others, in order to face and defeat Deathwalker Prime. But this is something that happened for a short moment during the second half of issue 14, and it was a quick fight, to where not long after, all of these Avengers had just went back to their regular selves. But this time around, it's given to us in a way that seems like it's being done a bit differently. Because now with all these Deathlocks rushing into Earth-616, saying that they were sent by the Avenger of all Avengers to warn the multiverse from the tower at Infinity's End, which is a citadel that took many Starks, Thors, and Visions many days to build. But at this point, we still haven't gotten the answer to who this Avenger Prime is, who sent all of these Deathlocks. And I kind of feel like before we do get that reveal, I need to do a video on Avengers Prime, what we know so far. And I don't even want to say about him, because the Deathlocks, they often refer to Avengers Prime as a they. But let me know if you guys want me to go back and talk about that in a video, or if you'll be interested, because it kind of does set up everything that's happening here. But with getting back into the Death Hunters, it's here where T'Challa agrees to allow this Deathlock to interface with the Celestial, when he then turns to tell Namor and Valkyrie, Jane Foster, that they're all pretty much on their own here. So he's gonna need their help to get this Deathlock to the Celestial's brain so he can interface with it. And right away Jane, she's ready to help, but Namor, he's still on some I'm here because of a favor type mess. But eventually Namor reluctantly agrees to help because parts of the Celestial are falling into the sea. So from there Namor's kind of like, alright, you just point me at something to punch and I'll do what I do. And at a moment's notice, Kid Thanos then shows up, swooping right into Avengers Mountain, only to then get Imperious Rex'd right back out. Which reminds me of our recent Imperious Rex discussion during Maestro World War M, which recently I did a bit of an extended explanation of during the Maestro World War M big spill. So as far as that goes, if you know, you know. But with Namor taking on Kid Thanos, this gave Valkyrie some time to take the Deathlock along with Mr. Horse so they could follow the Celestial spinal nerves up to its brain so that the Deathlock can handle its business. But also while they're making their way, Black Panther, he's taking the time to prepare for Doom. And speaking of Doom, we quickly find that he's made his way into Avengers Mountain as he stops the Deathlock and the others from making their way to the Celestial's brain. But even with them getting caught off guard, Jane, she thinks quick and she calls forth Unyarn to carry the Deathlock the rest of the way while she holds off Doom. And Doom Supreme realizes that Jane had given up a lot of leverage by sending the all-weapon with the Deathlock and staying here to fight him without it. But initially when Doom Supreme hits Jane with a blast, to where all we're really told is that it cost the lives of 100 monks. But when Doom hits her with it, she just walks right through it. And we come to find out that this is mainly because many of Doom Supreme's spells, they come from a form of necromancy. But with her being a Valkyrie, this makes her impervious to his attacks, which then causes Doom Supreme to strip Jane of her power, telling her that he is death, which makes him the master of any Valkyrie, which then leaves Jane mortal, suffering in her human form. But then Mr. Horse then swoops back in, giving Doom a mean headbutt followed up by some skibbity paps. But Doom Supreme doesn't put up with much of this before he steps it up. But fortunately at this time, Jane and Mr. Horse get some help, because it's here where T'Challa jumps in with this Red Panther upgrade, which has armor of metallicized Orisha blood with stone fragments from the Wakandan necropolis on his knuckles. Like when T'Challa said he was preparing for Doom, he wasn't playing. And it almost seems like in a way that this Red Panther suit, it's been an idea that was crafted because of Wakanda's history with the Doom from this universe. And I mean, it's either that or T'Challa's just now reading Justice League issue 41, to where he was like, what? Red Lion? Hold my beer. But at this point, with Deathlock reaching the brain of the Celestial, the all-weapon then makes its way back to Jane, restoring her power, while T'Challa keeps Doom Supreme occupied. While in the meantime with Namor, he's telling Kid Thanos that back when he was king of Atlantis, he forbade the abuse of children. But now, since Namor is no longer king, and this Kid Thanos technically isn't a child, he's Thanos, which for the Avengers, it's always been one of those things to like, when you're fighting Thanos, there tends to be a lot of adjusting one's morals, as well as sketchy justifications made for young Thanos. But as you would expect, Namor is going to be honest either way. And he's like, yeah, I'm doing this to save the world, but I'm also going to enjoy it too. But when Kid Thanos then stabs him in the neck, this quickly calls for a change of plans on Namor's part. Because with doing this, Kid Thanos then gets away and makes his way back into Avengers Mountain with the intention of performing a celestial autopsy. And as Kid Thanos makes his way in, we see that the Deathlock is having trouble getting the Celestial to wake up, with him saying that the orb is dead, the fist of the beast is risen, the great red flood is coming, the drowning of all that is. Wake up, God, what are you so afraid of? And it's right away here where Doom Supreme makes his escape, as well as Kid Thanos, who Namor had just caught up to. And as soon as the two of them get out of here, T'Challa, he knows that something isn't right, because there's no way that these two would have just left while leaving the Deathlock still here. And it's right then when they notice that Avengers Mountain has been rigged to explode, we find that the Deathlock has failed at awakening the Celestial Ghost. And at this point, there is no time to try anything else. So quickly, T'Challa tells everyone to get out, and then boom, there's just massive explosions all over Avengers Mountain, which from here takes us into the conclusion that we'll get into on the next one. So now for this one, I want to go back and talk about why we're finding Deathlocks all over the place before we get into the conclusion of the Death Hunters, with that series just being a part of a much bigger story that's building up. Alright, so for the most part, all of this starts from what we'd seen in Avengers issue 750, at least from a linear perspective, because at that time, when we talked about the significance of the Avengers 1 million BC, as well as why Mephisto wanted them gone, this then led us to finding Doom Supreme, who's from an alternate universe 1 million years in the past on Earth-616, which is where he met 616 Mephisto, who at the time had dropped the idea in his mind of assembling the multiversal Masters of Evil, who essentially was a team that was handpicked by Doom Supreme with the agenda of going to every Earth 1 million years in the past to kill each version of the Avengers 1 million BC in order to rewrite the timeline on every world so that the Age of Heroes would never happen. And with doing so, any of them could just rewrite that world's history in their image. But for us, back in 2021, in the Free Comic Book Day Hulk issue, we had gotten a glimpse or a teaser for the events that we're seeing unfolding now. Because at the very beginning of that issue, it had taken us over to the God Quarry at Infinity's End, which some of you guys may remember from the Thanos 2017 series when we first got the introduction. And with how it was introduced at the time, it was shown to be this realm at the edge of the universe that some would call the Quarry of Creation or Infinity's End. And in this quarry at the time, which was guarded by 3 witches known as the Coven, different gods would enter in, they would be tested, and if I remember correctly, when they passed the test, they'd come out with their full potential, but if they failed, they would be just trapped there. And at the time, with how this was presented, it very much felt like Marvel's version of the Source Wall, with the whole gods going there to die thing, them getting trapped there, edge of the universe, stone-like figures. There's a lot of similarities. But within the Infinity War storyline, We'd also seen Loki cross a barrier, which had taken him to the primordial universe, where he found countless celestials and a litter of infinity stones, which weren't usable there, but it was more so showing how the celestials would distribute these stones across the multiverse. But in 2021, this is when we got the introduction to this disturbance that had been discovered at Infinity's End, to where at this point a number of temporal cataclysms had been detected. And at this point, when we return to Infinity's End, we find a citadel that is also said to be a lighthouse at the root of all and always. But plain and simple, it's Avengers Tower. But with how it's described here, it's built within this megaversal orchard in the rich soil of rotting gods. It took a number of Starks, Thors, and Visions days to build it, yet one Avenger stands alone within its halls, to whom you may have guessed is Avenger Prime. But once again, throughout this preview, Avenger Prime is very much a mystery and yet to be revealed at this time. But when we jump in, we see that Avenger Prime has called a number of Deathlocks, telling them that this is a primary Omega alert because of a mysterious phenomenon that's registering shockwaves of full chronal collapse across the multiverse. And these Deathlocks that we see here, many of whom look quite familiar, but with seeing these guys here, we're told that they were assembled as cybernetic soldiers whose human portions were mined from the lost fruits that sometime fall from the orchard, with that orchard of course being the quarry. And it also goes on to describe these guys as sour apples that have been lost in the ether. And with them being converted into Deathlocks, it's pretty much like them getting one more chance at redemption. But with us seeing Avenger Prime call these guys to check out this anomaly, we then find that Avenger Prime sends all agents into the field immediately, to where from there we see a number of them go into the superflow, which is like Marvel's version of the bleed, the space between universes. But with doing this, the Avenger Prime has sent out these Deathlocks to make their way to different Earths across the Megaverse to gather as much information as possible about this anomaly and report what they find back to Avenger Prime. And it's here where we follow one of these Deathlocks who make their way to Earth-616, which is an Earth that is described to be pretty much a paradise, because here Atlantis had never fell as a result of the Great Cataclysm of 18,000 BC, and on this world, within this modern day paradise, it's guarded by the almighty Atlantean Avengers. And really, just from the look of these guys, I imagine they have some really interesting backstories, but unfortunately we never get into that. And I'll tell you why in just a moment. Because with the Deathlock that was heading here to Earth-616, he finds himself blindsided by the Berserker Wolverine of the Dark Phoenix. And immediately this Deathlock tries to get more information on this Wolverine because he don't look right. But all this Deathlock is told is that this Wolverine is not of this universe. But finally, when this Deathlock lands on Earth-616, which is supposed to be a paradise, only for him to get here and find that this place is completely barren, because this Earth was at the epicenter of a temporal cataclysm. And with seeing this, the Deathlock is like, how did this happen? Answer, unknown. To where then he's like, well, where do I find Atlantis? Where do I find the Avengers? Only for him then to find out that the Avengers don't exist in this reality. But because he knows how this world should have been, right away he knows that this Earth's reality has been rewritten. And when he figures this out, it's then just a case of him asking the right question. And from there, when he asks where did these shockwaves originate, it's here where he gets the answer, roughly 1 million years in the past. But just moments after this, the computer then tells him, correction, Avenger detected. And it's right there where he just sees this head roll, which is the head of a Ghost Rider from Earth-1719. And this head just starts talking like, hello, is someone there? If you are there, run. Please run, because I cannot help what's about to. And then boom, this head just explodes, blasting this Deathlock like something out of a Terminator film. But when this happens, this Deathlock reports the last bit of information from what he's seen and what he's gathered, because it's here where he discovered that he's been hunted down by the multiversal masters of evil, who, like we were told in the recent issues of Avengers, these guys have been making their way across the multiverse, killing the Avengers 1 million BC and rewriting the history of a number of different Earths. But in addition to that, when they found out that these Deathlocks had been sent out and investigating, which let them know that these Deathlocks were on their trail. So to keep everything on the low, the Masters of Evil then went on the side mission of killing all the Deathlocks, because they wanted to make sure that the secret of what they were doing didn't get out. But with them killing this Deathlock, a message of course had made its way out, calling to all Earths, sending a warning for all Avengers to let them know that the Masters of Evil are coming, which is what then takes us into the Death Hunters story that we're covering now. But even with what we're shown throughout Death Hunters, there's still a lot more going on in the bigger picture, because with Death Hunters, it's really just a bunch of Deathlocks getting killed off, with the Masters of Evil trying to cover their tracks, and then Avengers Forever, that story starts to take us to the different Earths, with a ton of variants of nearly every hero scattered throughout that series, both in the main Avengers Forever series and in the Infinity comics. But let me know you guys' thoughts in the comments below. Hopefully we shed a little light on the answer to where all these deathlocks came from, but on top of that, by all means have fun with it, and let me know if you guys think you know who Avenger Prime is. Could it be Loki? Could it be Thane? Could it be a group of Avengers merged into one? I'm curious to know what you guys think. Alright, so when we jump back in, we pick up right from the attack on Avengers Mountain from Doom Supreme and Kid Thanos, who had slipped away, leaving Avengers Mountain in complete and utter devastation. And it's here where we see Captain America, Captain Marvel, Brandy Selby, the Star Brand, making their way back with the one remaining Deathlock that they were able to save in Kansas City. And with them making their way back, they try to reach out to Avengers Mountain, but they get no response. And Cap doesn't like how this is looking, with them getting attacked in Kansas City, as well as Thor and Tony getting attacked in Asgard, and Avengers Mountain just going silent. And even suggests that Carol flies ahead to check it out before they get there, but she lets Cap know that it's probably not the best idea that they split up right now. And aside from that, Carol also has her concerns about Brandy, because when she aged up after using the full power to Star Brand, there's really no telling what that truly means. But with Brandy doing this, the one Deathlock that they were able to save, he's grateful, because with Brandy literally sacrificing years of her life to save him, he vows to her that he will do everything in his power to make sure that her sacrifice was not in vain. But then he gets one shot through the back, and that vow that he had just made, it means nothing now. And we quickly find out that this attack had came from the Dark Phoenix Berserker Thor, as we see his hammer fly back to him, which quickly lets us know that the fight that started in Asgard has made its way to Earth. But then also it's here where 616 Thor arrives shortly after, where we start to slip into the realm of narrative points that didn't age well. Because when Thor sees this Berserker and he tells him that there's no way that you could have been an actual Thor or a true Thor on his world. And it's here where the Dark Phoenix says that he was, and not only that, but also that he's her son, to where then Berserker Thor confirms. And if you guys remember, I mentioned before on this playlist that during the time that the Death Hunters event was going, that this was taking place in Jason Aaron's Avengers, well before we got the definitive answer in Donny Cates' Thor God of Hammers. So kind of keep that in mind as we go through some of this stuff with Thor, because there are a lot of moments throughout this story that play off of the suspense and the build up to who Thor's mother actually is, which again is no longer a mystery. But at this point in the story, we do kind of play with the idea a bit more, because when Echo arrives and she attacks the Berserker and takes his hammer, this Phoenix and Thor versus Phoenix and Thor tag team match, it feeds into it as well. But before we get into that, we then go back to Avengers Mountain, where we find Namor lifting a portion of the wreckage from the damaged Celestial and calling for any Avenger who may have survived underneath to hurry up and crawl out, because this thing heavy. And with him saying this right away, we then see T'Challa doing the same to give any survivor the chance of getting out, while also low-key pointing out to Namor that he didn't ditch everybody else either, because both of these guys had the split-second decision to either stay behind or try to escape the blast, but both of them stayed. But then also in this moment with Namor being way stronger than T'Challa on his best day, we also find that his Red Panther suit vibranium force shields are at maximum power, which means walking out of here, his suit will go back to black. But before we just brush over that, I do want to say that with T'Challa using this Red Panther upgrade for the brief moment that he did, that hopefully this isn't the last that we've seen of it, because with its anti-magic protocols, metallicized Orisha blood armor, and knuckles made from the stones of the necropolis, like the way that this thing is spec'd out, it makes you really wonder what he can really do with this suit, because if it's enough to chase off the Doom above all, it then just really leaves us to wonder how this suit would match up to either other magic users or supernatural enemies. So fingers crossed that we see more of it again. And on top of that, let me know in the comments when and where you'd like to see the Red Panther suit come back. But at this time with Namor and T'Challa holding up the wreckage from Avengers Mountain, Jane Foster, Valkyrie, she tells both of them not to budge, because she had found the Deathlock who was trying to awaken the Celestial critically injured, so she has to do surgery on him right away because there's no time to move him, so she uses the All Weapon to create a scalpel, and she does just that. But then from here we then jump back over to the Phoenix Thor tag team, where we find Thor using a lightning attack on this Berserker, but it does nothing. And it's here where Echo lets Thor know that this Berserker, who is a corrupted Thor, who has been corrupted by the Dark Phoenix, he's more Firebird than Thunder God, and you can't kill a Phoenix with lightning, because only a Phoenix can burn a Phoenix. And we're not talking about hosts, we're talking about Phoenix versus Phoenix here. And maybe it's just me, but this just conflicts everything I thought I knew about the Phoenix. Or at least what I believed I had learned in the Phoenix Force handbook, when it said that the Phoenix Force is the nexus of all psionic energy that has, does, and ever will exist in all realities of the multiverse, who's also reborn at the beginning of every cosmos. But I mean, hey, I could be missing something. but we're just gonna keep it pushing for the time being. But as soon as Echo says this, Dark Phoenix binds her and the Berserker gets his hammer back. And right away the Berserker starts getting the upper hand on Thor again, while Echo's in the background telling Thor, you got fire inside of you, use it. And it's here where Thor says, I am Thor, son of, and Echo finishes his sentence saying son of the Thunderbird, the god of the firestorm. And right then Thor hits this Berserker with the fire Hadouken, which again, at the time, plays back into the mystery of who Thor's mother is, which I won't spoil for anyone who's just getting caught up and they're new to all of this, but I also don't want to go back and talk about this and not tell you that it's not the Phoenix. So at this point, if you're fresh jumping into Jason Aaron's Avengers and you haven't read Donny Cates' Thor yet, the latest Thor series will get you caught up, more specifically during God of Hammers. Though I do feel like at some point during this playlist, I did mention the answer to that, so if you're one of the few that doesn't know and you want to keep it a mystery, I'll just say you've been warned before you go in that comment section, because we did talk about it before and there might be a person or two who may mention it in the comments below. But from here with the Dark Phoenix and her Berserker defeated, we find that Tony's caught up with the gang and Captain Marvel, she's carrying the jet because Captain America is the only Avenger inside that cannot fly. But with this crew meeting back together, they make their way to Avengers Mountain to figure out why it has gone completely silent. And just below the mountain we find Doom Supreme and Kid Thanos, with them watching Avengers Mountain burn and Doom saying the last Deathlock on this planet is deceased, which pretty much means that their job is done. Because again, they only came here to kill Deathlocks. And so with them here, of course Kid Thanos is like, okay, well if we're done, why are we still here? And as soon as he says that, Mephisto shows up with his Iron Inquisitor. And when they get here, there's a bit of tension between Mephisto and Doom Supreme. Because if you guys remember, back in Avengers issue 750, these two had made an agreement to where Doom agreed that with the multiversal masters of evil conquering different worlds across the multiverse, that they would save Earth-616 for last. So with Mephisto arriving here and him telling Doom Supreme, did you think I wouldn't notice what you done? And right away it gives that awkward moment because Doom, he's just like, nah, these Deathlocks, man, it was the Deathlocks was out here, we was killing them. We ain't rewrite time out here, ain't nothing changed. As Avengers Mountain is just burning in the background. But Mephisto lets Doom Supreme know that that's not why he's here, but instead Mephisto's reasoning for coming here, it goes a bit deeper. Because Mephisto's upset with Doom Supreme for killing the orb, and really not so much for killing the orb, but burning the Watcher's eye after killing the orb. And when we've seen Doom Supreme destroy the Watcher's eye before, it was done in a way to where he didn't care because he didn't think it would be any use to him, because eventually him and the multiversal masters of evil, they're just gonna rewrite history here at some point anyway. But Mephisto calls Doom Supreme out, and he tells Doom, no, you destroyed it because you didn't want me to get to it. And it's right then when Mephisto tells Doom to go ahead and unburn it, respectfully, and Mephisto tells him to don't bother to lie and say that he can't, because he can tell if a man is lying even if he's a man behind a mask. But with Mephisto saying this, Doom doesn't even argue or say that Mephisto's wrong, but instead he unburns the eye and he takes a bite out of it, because before he just hands it back to Mephisto, Doom Supreme wants to make sure that he gets a bit of this insight to these secrets as well. But interestingly enough, after taking this bite, he just calls for Kid Thanos, and then from there the two of them just meet up with the other multiversal masters of evil. But as soon as the two of them leave, the Iron Inquisitor tells Mephisto that Doom definitely knows now. He knows what the Council of Red are planning. And Mephisto says that he knows that Doom knows, but also with Doom knowing this, it's the only reason that Doom didn't try to kill Mephisto just now, because Doom Supreme's not going to take that chance or opportunity to get rid of Mephisto until he figures out how to make it a win completely for himself. And with the Iron Inquisitor asking Mephisto, okay, so when they come, how do we deal with Doom Supreme and the Masters of Evil? And it's from here where Mephisto then consumes the rest of the Watcher's eye in order to see how many bites it takes to figure that out. And from there, they just throw the orb's body into the water. And just after this, we then find that the rest of the Avengers, they made their way back, and the team's pretty much reassembled again, with the exception of Robbie Reyes, with his story that spins off into Avengers Forever. But with everyone coming together here, Namor, he's more or less like, okay, looks like you guys got it from here, I'm out. And he tries to tell him like he'll come back if needed. But then Captain America hits him with the quick, no you don't, like not so fast. And Cap lets Namor know, because of the trouble that Namor has caused in the past few months, just the past few months, that he is placing Namor in Avengers custody, because him hanging around for a few hours just because Jennifer Walters made Namor feel guilty for a little bit, that's not enough. And with hearing this, Namor just agrees and he goes along with it. But then it's from here where we get the ending with a bit of a twist to it, because it's here where we find that the Deathlock, who had attempted to awaken the Celestial, he's not dead. But the Avengers aren't entirely sure if he's alive either, because with Jane being able to save his body by performing on-site all-weapon surgery, she needs to keep him connected to the Celestial to keep him breathing. And aside from that, at this time he's showing no brain activity. And so from here, a couple things happen to close this out. Because for one, the Avengers, immediately they call a meeting, because even though the Deathlocks who had came to this world got slaughtered, they did successfully get their message to the Avengers. But now the Avengers gotta figure out what they're gonna do about it. But then from here, we hear the thought narration of this Deathlock, saying that the Avengers are not ready for this fight unlike any other, a fight for all the worlds. But then this Deathlock mentions that they need his help, but he feels trapped within a broken, weakened body. A body that doesn't even feel like his own. A body that's as big as a mountain. Because the last Deathlock that has survived, he is now tethered to the body of the progenitor Celestial. Which leaves us with an interesting cliffhanger for the Deathlock who got away. And so now real quick, I want to give a special shout out to all the patrons. Thank you guys for all of your support. And for anyone who's new here, who wants more information on how to support the channel, I got a link below, so you can go to patreon.com/dopespill. But that'll do it for this one, guys. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and we'll do it again on the next one. Alright, later.